Today we're hosting another live Q&A. Now, you'll have to forgive me while I first sort out the camera. For some reason, it always does this. It changes how it looks from the initial setup. So please forgive me as I just quickly adjust the setup here a little bit. Right, that's a little bit better. There we go. That's better. So I'm going to have to insert the usual caveats here because I am on baby duty tonight again. So it's going to be a case of if I hear little Eleanor crying or it requires me in any shape or form, then I am going to have to go and deal with that. But I will try to create a more hushed tone just so I don't disturb her. But as I say, I might have to get up midstream and actually go and sort that out at some point. So just bear with me. I have already had to go in there twice before the live stream. It doesn't bode well for the evening, but I will endeavour to try to keep this on track. Now, the last live stream that we had on the 24th of February was actually interrupted, and I did not know this initially. So it cut out after about 15 minutes or so, but I kept going because I didn't realise that there was a problem. I was just doing my usual spiel, my usual introduction, and then I was going to get to the Q&A part, and I must have been talking for maybe half an hour, 40 minutes or so before I realised that the stream had basically ended and I wasn't talking to anyone at all. And what's worse is that that segment, up until about 15 minutes, that was saved by YouTube and that was uploaded onto the channel, but the rest of it was not. So a lot of the stuff that I was talking about didn't actually get filtered through. So we got Quacker's Kingdom here saying hello. So the first thing I wanted to discuss, just to rehash basically what I was going to discuss on the last live stream, was the fact that we have now 300,000 views, over 300,000 views now on our YouTube channel, and that's across all of our videos. And that's obviously a major milestone from our own perspective, because what we are doing with this nation building experience is incredibly niche. And to have that many people say, we are interested in what you are doing, we want to watch your videos, we enjoy your content and all the rest of it, that is something that I take a great deal of pride in. Because not a lot of people can say the same thing. There are very few aspirant nations or communities or anything of that nature that have the kinds of followings that we do. There are some that are larger than Stomaria's, but Stomaria has managed to accomplish all of this without any mainstream legacy media attention. It's done so without being around for an especially long time. We are very new in the great scheme of things, and we have been able to accomplish a great deal, and I don't take that lightly. I'm very appreciative of all the support that we have received over the last nearly 6 years now since we were founded, and hopefully we'll be able to turn that 300,000 into 400, 500, 600, a million, and so on and so forth, before we really start to take off in a really major way. And that's ultimately what this is all about. It's all building up to a greater expansion of our social media presence to ensure that as many people as possible are aware that we exist. Because as soon as people are aware that we exist, then that's when they start to get involved. That's when they start to ask questions. That's when they start to play a part in Stomaria's expansion and its development. And that's ultimately what it's all about. It's just about raising awareness of Stomaria to encourage people to get involved, and then from there we'll be able to expand in the real world, which is ultimately the goal. That's what we want to do. Having a massive presence on social media is fantastic. It's a great asset to have, but it's not a victory in its own right. It's not the end goal. And I think a lot of people probably miss the mark on that one a little bit. They try to focus exclusively on expanding their social media presence without actually doing anything out there in the real world. And it just defeats the object entirely, because you just become something for entertainment purposes as opposed to actually going out there and building a community, building a nation. The other thing that I wanted to quickly touch upon was the developments that we have been undertaking at Southwood. Now, I have recently released a progress report to that effect. The progress reports, I find, never really gain that much traction. Over the course of several days or weeks, they might get a few hundred views here, there and everywhere, but it's never really been the case that it's been a massively popular aspect of the channel. But I like to do it for my own benefit, if nothing else, because I get to see over the years how the territory of Stomaria has developed over the years. So we can look back at, I think it was probably January, February, maybe March in 2023 when this first started, and what the land looked like and how much work there was to be done. And now we're at now, which is nearing quote unquote completion. And I say that only because there's always more work to be done. But we are really making strides and have done over the last few months, because we are clearing out as much as humanly possible. We have removed massive amounts of waste and rubbish and scrap metal from the site. We've taken down that watchtower, which was becoming more and more dilapidated, and eventually that will be replaced. We have sown more clover seeds. We've brought in more gravel for the pathways. We're actually going to have a professional subcontractor come in to do some measuring up in a few weeks' time to get some gates put in, which are going to be done properly, so they won't be as sort of dilapidated, if you like. And we have the granite sign and postbox and other signage ready for that gate as and when that gets installed. And also we are currently clearing out the myriad of tyres. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of tyres on site, and this is all before my time. Like 99.9% of the rubbish that's being brought off site is nothing to do with myself or Stomaria. It's all to do with what was there before. And myself and King Daniel Brooks, he has been instrumental in helping me to clear out a lot of this land, because our shared vision for Southwood and Wayward South is primarily about downsizing it as much as we can, removing as much waste and unnecessary clutter as possible, and then preserving it almost as an ecological area, but also to utilize it for what you might call tourism. So we're going to be having, either camping or glamping, or probably somewhere in between. I think nearly wild camping is a phrase that gets thrown about from time to time. But the idea is that we want to start generating revenue by having people who aren't necessarily affiliated with Stomaria or Wayward or anything like that coming onto the land and being able to camp and enjoy the experience. And while they're there, they will be able to see themselves what we are doing, because we all have things there that will obviously allude to the fact that this is Stomarian and Waywardian territory. We're going to have the flags still up, obviously. We're going to have the granite tablets, which have the names of Stomaria and Wayward respectively, and Southwood and Wayward South respectively. They're going to be displayed, and I'm hoping that over the course of the next year or so, we're going to be able to turn Southwood and Wayward South into a small tourist hotspot, in order to be able to generate some significant revenue for the Empire more broadly, in order to fund ongoing projects. Because ultimately what we want to do is we want to take a step back from Southwood and Wayward South, because we want to focus our attention elsewhere. We want to acquire that next territory. We want to go out there and we want to actually develop something new. Because if we keep going back to Southwood and Wayward South, we're just never going to progress. And so we need to really hit the nail on the head. We need to get this done this year if we can, and especially before the Imperial Summit in June, which I'll get to in a minute. But the idea is that we just want to finish up. We want to get the land done so we can actually focus ourselves on other things. And that's the main driver, that's the main focus of both myself and Daniel at the moment. We want to really ram home the finishing touches on the land before the Imperial Summit, and anything outstanding can be done, like major works like tree felling or anything like that might have to be done after the Imperial Summit. But ultimately we want to get things ready, set up, so we don't have to be there as often as we are. Now, speaking of the Imperial Summit, we are still making preparations for that. I mean, the preparation of the summit kind of goes hand in hand with developments at Southwood, because ultimately that is where the summit will be taking place. So anything that we do at Southwood is ultimately preparing everything for the summit itself. That said, we are still in the midst of trying to figure out how big we can make this, in the sense that we are starting to get more and more confirmed attendees, which is fantastic. And for those that want to attend the Imperial Summit in June, but haven't yet confirmed, then please do, because we obviously need to start to gauge numbers before too long. But when it comes to what we're actually going to do on the day, it will be, as per usual, it'll be a mixture of feasting and competitions and stalls and workshops. There'll be a bouncy castle, I think, on site, even though I think, at the moment, I think it's only Princess Eleanor is going to be the only child there. But I doubt that will stop the usage of the bouncy castle going to slightly older individuals. Perhaps myself included. Maybe you'll have the Emperor of Stomaria bouncing on the bouncy castle with his little princess at the summit. But that aside, we want to try to make the event a special one, and we want to make it as grand as possible. You know, not just with the stalls and everything, but maybe with like raffles, and we're considering having staters being minted by attendees on the actual day, which we'll bring the anvil and the hammer, and we'll bring some blank silver stater bars, and let the attendees of the summit stamp those as a memento, if you like. So there are things that we want to do for the summit, but it's a numbers game ultimately. If we have 10, 12, 15 people, that would be great. If we can get more, fantastic. But even if it's like the low the high single digits, say 8 or 9 people pushing into 10, then we're going to be we won't go as big, if you like, because we don't need to. And ultimately it is just a case of we'll cater for whoever shows up, and I'm still looking forward to it, regardless of how big it actually ends up being. I am looking forward to it because it is going to be a special occasion. It's going to be the 3rd Imperial Summit that we've ever hosted, but it is also, all being well, going to be the last time we have the summit at Southwood and Wayward South, because we will have, hopefully, developed a new territory, which is perhaps slightly closer to home and might be more accommodating, if not just a change of scenery, and we'll be able to do more with that land. Now, I'm not going to speak too much of what that land actually consists of, because I'm not saying we've actually purchased any land. I'm not saying that we're actually looking for the land at the moment, but I'm saying the intention is we are going to be expanding towards the end of this year, if at all possible. But it very much depends on just what's on the market at the time, and what we have in terms of capital at the time to actually bring that about. But yes, so the developments and expansion of Stomaria and the wider empire is still very much on the cards, and finishing off Southwood is a big part of that. Now, before we actually have the summit, two videos I should say, that I actually want to do is I want to finish off the How to Start a Nation series. We have, I think, probably 7 or 8 videos for that now. But what I want to do is I want to do the final 2 videos, which I have scripted, but I have not been able to bring myself to actually record because they're quite lengthy, I think. And I just haven't found myself the, not necessarily the time, just the will to actually go out and actually film these, because they're not actually my favourite kind of videos to make. I much prefer talking about things regarding Stomaria specifically, or the member states of the Empire, or something more related to what we're actually doing, as opposed to creating an instruction manual for other people. I understand a lot of people do find the How to Start a Nation series to be quite helpful. It's one of our most popular series on the channel. It's one of the most popular aspects of the channel, and it's one of the main reasons that a lot of people come across us in the first place. So I don't begrudge making the videos up until this point, but I will say that it is not my favourite part of the job. I don't look forward to making them. It's just something I feel like I have to finish off. And it should probably be relatively self-evident, because when I actually started the How to Start a Nation series, I actually began that in, it must have been early, probably February, March 2023, I think. So it's obviously been going a long time, and in that time I've only done like 8 videos, give or take. And actually, when you look back on the earlier videos that we did for the How to Start a Nation series, you can see how much has changed. I'm wearing the old uniform of the Imperial Guard, the setup's slightly different, I'm clean shaven. We still had the citizens join up through Patreon and all the rest of it. A lot has changed in the 2 years or more since I started that series, to the point where I could quite happily restart a similar series and talk about how to build a nation or an empire, whatever else, um, from a even fresher perspective than I have now. So I won't be doing that anytime soon. Maybe in a few years, let's say half a decade or so, when I've been a bit more boots on the ground, when I've done a lot more, when I've progressed a bit further, and I have more information to give people based on my own experiences, which is ultimately what the How to Start a Nation series is about. Then maybe we'll do that. But suffice to say, I've got 2 more videos that I want to do for the How to Start a Nation series, and then hopefully I can just leave that there to accumulate those views and likes and watch hours. So before we go any further, I just want to quickly acknowledge a few people that have joined in. So Steve Berger says, does Stomaria have a library or a school? No. So Stomaria is very, very early stages, in the sense that we don't have any major infrastructure, we don't have any major governmental departments or anything to that effect. We wouldn't presume to be able to educate children in as much as they can be educated through what you might call the mainstream system. But certainly having some kind of educational system in place in later years would be, I think, beneficial. Maybe not necessarily things like English or math or things, but perhaps something more practical, because ultimately children will need to learn the basics when it comes to reading, writing, mathematics, that sort of thing, and it's not necessary from our own perspective to go down the route of trying to fill that particular void or lack thereof, because I think the education system by and large up until a certain point is quite effective in that way. But trying to educate people, not just necessarily children, but also adults, about the wider world is certainly something that we would be interested in doing. It might be things, practical things. It might be something to do with gardening or agriculture or bushcraft or survival skills, that sort of thing. But it also might be to do with discussing the pros and cons of different economic or monetary or governmental systems, and trying to, expand people's knowledge on those particular subjects. Because ultimately, the way the world works is something that I think is quite important, and how the way the world could work if enough people got together and actually thought about it and had that discussion, had that conversation, I think would be quite worthwhile. And I quite like the idea of having workshops, for lack of a better term, where people are discussing things that revolve around how the world is run, how the world is governed, and your place in it, and how you can advance your own interests, and how you can look after yourself and your own family, maximize your own freedom and your own personal liberty, and reducing reliance on others for your own basic needs. Ultimately, that's what I would like to see, and it is one of the big selling points of Stomaria, in that we are very keen to advance the interests of the individual. It's about individual rights and individual liberty, about providing for yourself, about lessening your need on the wider world, not in an isolationist way, not in the sense that you can pull up the drawbridge, shut everyone out and think everything's been all right, but certainly sort of growing your own food or supplying your own water or generating your energy on smaller scales, I think is going to be far more beneficial to the wider world than simply relying on third parties, or in many cases on entirely different nations, to keep your lights on, or to keep your bellies full and to keep you hydrated. I think being able to provide some of the bare necessities of life, for lack of a better term, being able to provide those for yourself, I think is something that is worth striving for, and something that we're very keen to advocate for. But the long and the short of it is, no, we don't have a library or a school as such, but certainly an education, in the sense that we want like workshops or sort of just more open air discussions, if you like, about particular topics. I think that is something that we would like to do. Quacker's Kingdom says, do you engage in diplomacy with any Micronations, and if so, which ones? Also, have you been noticed by any Micronations / UN member states? So in terms of diplomacy with micronations, I don't think we have any like formal affiliations or anything like that with any self-defined micronation, um, bar the communities and the entities that are within the empire itself, that being the Kingdom of Wayward and the Republic of Vesta, neither of which identify as micronations in the sense that they identify as a part of the micronational community in a way a lot of others do. But the idea that we have any formal affiliations with anyone else beyond that, no, not at this time. But I should stress it's not because we are adverse to building relationships with other entities, with other communities. And it's not from lack of trying on the part of others, because we get these sorts of requests and applications and all the rest of it many, many times a week. But the criteria that we have for formal affiliations, the bar, is quite high, because a lot of self-defined micronations, when they're out there, they don't have a lifespan that typically lasts beyond a few months, and even those that do, they're normally quite satirical or meme-like. They're not typically interested or serious about trying to establish something long-lasting or genuine or stable or practical or realistic. It's normally a case of people setting up micronations, and they're normally preteens or adolescents that are declaring wars or embargoes or sanctions or promoting some sort of ideology which we consider to be reprehensible, be it fascism or neo-Nazism or communism. And ultimately their entire existence revolves around creating drama with others for the sake of creating drama, and then just dissolving, quietly fading into oblivion. And that's ultimately the fate of, I'd say, 99% of micronations that have ever existed and will ever exist. There are very, very few that have staying power, and as I say, the few that do, there are only an exceptionally few among them which we would consider to be worthwhile engaging with, and trying to actually build relationships with those kinds of entities is something that we're always happy to do. But as I say, even when Stomaria identified as a micronation, we were part of the micronational community and all of that jazz, there was still only a handful of people and a handful of entities which we could identify as individuals and entities that we would actually want to build those relationships with. So as I say, not from lack of trying, but it's just it's not on the cards a lot of the time, because they're just not looking to do what we're looking to do. Is the simplest thing I can say. They're looking to do a myriad of other things that just have nothing to do with nation building, and that's ultimately what we're interested in. As to your other question as to whether or not we've been noticed by macronations or UN member states, the very short and simple answer is no. Being noticed or being recognised by those sorts of bodies, the more traditional, conventional, more established nations of the world, that's not really a goal of ours, in the sense that if it happens, that would be fantastic, but striving for it is a bit pointless. What you'd be better off doing is just striving to build the nation that you want to be recognised, if that is ultimately your goal. For us, we've always maintained a pretty standard position with this, which is people recognizing us or not recognizing us is not especially important. People not recognizing Stomaria does not stop Stomaria from existing. I can still go out there and I can still grow my potatoes, and I can still put up solar panels, and I can still collect my water, and I can still build dwellings for my family and for the people that follow us and all the rest of it. We don't require people's recognition in order to live in the real world and to live in reality. An example I made in a recent video, well, many examples, but if you look at Taiwan as a prime example, Taiwan, also known as the Republic of China, is not recognized by virtually all, bar a dozen member states of the United Nations. But they still exist, they're still around, they still function just as any other state, any other government, any other nation would. And so people's lack of recognition, or the government's lack of recognition of Taiwan as a independent entity or as a sovereign entity or just as an entity in its own right that isn't simply a province of the People's Republic of China, it doesn't change the fact that they still exist and they still are exerting their own version of an independence. And I'm not saying that we're on the same level as Taiwan, I'm just saying that being recognized or engaged with macronations, for lack of a better term, is not a goal in itself for us. We're far more interested in just living in reality, living in the real world, and living our best lives. And ultimately, this is going to be a multi-generational nation building project. And if that were to happen, it's certainly not going to be in my lifetime, I would imagine, bar some apocalyptic event, which neither I nor anyone else, I'm sure, wishes for. So hopefully that answers your question. Winklepicker says, good evening from Wayward. Good evening. Yes, I know exactly who you are. I hope all is well. The Empire of Victoria says, what is your view of the Russo-Ukraine war? So I've said this before and I'll say it again. I do not take positions with international affairs of that nature because it doesn't typically have anything to do with Stomaria. And if I dedicated my time and my effort and my energy in discussing the Russo-Ukrainian war or the conflict going in between Israel and Palestine, or the Sudanese conflict, or the Myanmar civil war, or the friction, the tensions going on between Venezuela and Guyana, I don't have time to discuss all of these particular talking points. And just discussing what's hot on the actual day, it's pointless to me. I don't like doing it. I don't like trading in blood social media clout, frankly. I just want to talk about things that have a direct impact on Stomaria itself. And I think the only two times I can think of that we've ever discussed anything to do with macronational events, as it were, was Brexit and COVID, because both of those had an immediate and direct impact on Stomaria itself. So we did briefly touch on those, but that's the only time we've ever done so. We've never discussed the election of Donald Trump. We've never discussed the UK general election. We've never discussed the Israeli-Gaza war. We've never discussed the Ukrainian-Russian war. We've never discussed any other conflicts, of which there are, well over a dozen hot conflicts, either, wars or civil wars or brewing tensions between different nations or peoples. You could discuss this until the cows come home, but it doesn't have anything to do with Stomaria. And so we just don't discuss it. And to reiterate the point, I don't take positions when it comes to the Ukrainian and Russian war. I've seen both sides of the argument. I can understand where both sides come from on some level or another, but I don't pass comment or judgment on those sorts of things, because ultimately my position will be determined to be the position of Stomaria, and it's just not worth getting into. It's not worth dividing the Stomarian community over something that has absolutely nothing to do with Stomaria more generally. So yeah, I'm sorry I can't give a more specific answer than that. Guardian1326, hello again, says, greetings, glad to see you back after the last one was cut short. Yes, I was discussing that at the beginning of this video. It was so annoying. We saved about 15 minutes of it, or YouTube did rather. And I kept talking for, I don't know, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, which was footage that was ultimately wasted because I didn't realise it had been cut off. So that was a bit frustrating for me. But glad you're able to join this one. Top Stritch says, are you considering tourism as a part of Stomaria's future economy? Yes, absolutely. So as I was saying a little bit earlier in this video, tourism is something that we are going to be pushing hard at some point in the near future. We just need to get the land ready for it. So Southwood and Wayward South are being primed and prepped basically for a tourist industry. We're downsizing everything. We're moving any excess clutter, any excess rubbish. We're going to boil it all back down, make it far more ecological, and make it more appealing for like campers and glampers and things like that, and potentially even have it for people that want to host events there or whatever else. But we want to make it so it is more appealing for people to actually come and enjoy with friends and family and all the rest of it, and to establish that kind of tourism kind of industry on that level. Because ultimately, as I said earlier in the video, we want to take a step back from southward and wayward south so we can focus our attention on developing the next territory. And so turning that into something which is a bit more hands-off, which a tourism industry like camping and glamping and that sort of thing would allow us to do, that is something that we're very interested in doing. Quacker's Kingdom says, thank you for answering my question. Stomaria has been a key influence in my journey to create a legitimate state and will continue to be. Viva Stomaria. Yes, I'm very glad to hear that. I know you did reach out to us probably a few months ago now about building a kind of formal affiliation. And I won't go into the specifics here, but I do hope that you manage to develop and expand your own community. And if you are taking some pages out of the Empire of Stomaria's playbook, as it were, then I see no reason in later years that you won't be necessarily prohibited from engaging in some sort of formal capacity with Stomaria if you so wish. But I am glad that you are one of the many out there that have taken some inspiration from what we have been doing. Archid Babu Merciful says, if a royal family gets exiled and some sovereign entities accept them sovereign, can they have legal state? What? Sorry, I'm just going to reread this because I'm a bit confused with what you're asking me here. If a royal family gets exiled and some sovereign entities accept them as sovereign, can they have legal status as a person of international law? I have no idea. I'm not sure what that's in relation to. Is there some specific example that you're referring to? When you say a royal family gets exiled, are you talking about, like, historically speaking, or are you talking about, like, a Micronations royal family gets exiled from that Micronation or something? Because in either case, I mean, Fred, I don't have a decent answer for you in the sense of the legal status of the person in terms of international law. I'm not overly familiar with that sort of thing, I have to say. So I'm afraid the question probably be wasted on me. Just to follow on, you also say, what is the status of plans for development of a university by Stomaria? There is none. I have never once mentioned nor particularly have any interest in establishing a university in Stomaria. We are many, many generations before that would even be considered as a priority in any shape or form. We are not even at the point where regular low-key workshops about bushcraft and that sort of thing is born in reality in any major way. So the idea that we have a university is just not feasible. It's not going to happen. And we've had the Royal Federation of Terrestria says that I'm glad I'm able to attend this. Well, I'm very glad to have you here. I know you do comment on some of our videos, and I know you did miss the last live stream. I think it was you that missed the last live stream anyway. But as I say, didn't miss much. It was cut very, very short, and we're here now. So that's all that matters. Now, I think, broadly speaking, that's all I wanted to cover in terms of updates for Stomaria itself. There are a few things that I did want to touch upon regarding some maybe behind-the-scenes work. So maybe I'll touch on that a little bit later on. But I think, broadly speaking, I've covered more or less what I wanted to cover so far. So make sure if you are interested in answering some questions, do keep them coming, because otherwise I will get to a point where it's just be necessary to wrap this up. We've been going only 35 minutes or so. Sometimes it lasts an hour, sometimes it lasts as much as 2 hours, but it just depends on the topics of conversation. But as I say, I think I've done my spiel by and large, bar a few minor things. So if there is anything that anyone else wants to ask, now would be your time, because I can't guarantee when the next live is going to be. Stefan Polisi says, this might be an odd question to ask, but could Stomaria have a separate flag to the Empire's flag, something like the USA and its states' flags, and how they have different flags? I'm not sure what you mean, sorry. So could Stomaria have a separate flag to the Empire's flag? But I think I can kind of understand where you're coming from, but the simple answer would be no. I think, in the sense that when you had like I don't know, the British Empire or something, there wasn't a flag for Britain and there was a different flag for the British Empire, as an example. And I assume it's much the same for every other empire on Earth. Typically, it's just the flag of the host nation, if you like. Um, and something I do generally try to avoid and try to discourage others from doing as well is creating too many flags and trying to change the flags. Stomaria's flag is very well known. It's very well recognized, I think, within the right circles, for lack of a better term. So a lot of micronations know Stomaria's flag. A lot of nation builders know what Stomaria's flag looks like. And then to introduce a new flag for no real reason um, is just not of really interest to me, and it's not something I have any desire to pursue. Um, I mean, I can kind of understand where you're coming from when you have like the United States flag and then you have the flag that represents each of the states, but we don't really need to do that because Stomaria, Wayward, Vesta, and the other previous member states of the Empire and the future member states of the Empire to come, they will have their own flags. We don't, try to erode those flags or mitigate them in any way. They fly proudly, quite happily, in a lot of cases. In fact, at Southwood and Wayward South, you have the flag of Stomaria and the flag of Wayward flying quite happily in the breeze. But we do differentiate between the Empire and Stomaria in a governmental way. But as I say, the flag of Stomaria just encompasses the Empire of Stomaria more generally. But no, I do appreciate the question all the same. Let's see, I think we're caught up there. Sorry, just got a quick message which I just need to have a quick look at. Good. Interestingly, and I'm not really sure if this is worth talking about, but since they have advertised themselves in the public space, and they built themselves from what I understand, a new website, and they have a Twitter account active, and they actually reached out to me yesterday. I'm quite excited to announce that the Princedom of Moreland, who was a former observer state, or something we called an observer state at the time, of the Empire back in the day, they have recently been re-established, and they're currently looking to develop and expand themselves up again. And Alexander was kind enough to drop me a message just to let me know about this, and I was very excited to have received that message because I've not heard from him for when was it? 2023. So it's got to be about 2 years, over 2 years since I heard from him, and I never really got a definitive answer as to what happened to him. So to have him come back and just to let me know that he's all right, he's trying up again, plodding along. That is something I'm very excited about and something I look forward to seeing. And I don't think I've actually yet told even the other member states of the Empire or the leading figures of the Empire more generally. So make this breaking news perhaps. So if Winklepicker, if you're still here, maybe you can message the Imperial Court chat to let them know that Alexander is back. He's around again, and we may hopefully hear from him before too long. So Archbishop Bobby Merciful says, let me ask again. Thank you for addressing my last two questions. Not sure what you're asking again. Don't see anything, so maybe you're still typing that up. Stephen Molossia says, okay, that makes sense. The home nation is the face of the overall nation, while the others have their exactly. So they still keep their own flags, their entity in the empire. I mean, that is broadly what we are. Sumeria has always been a federal empire. It's been a federal monarchy. We don't try to erode the identities or the cultures or the aspirations of those that join the empire. We try to advance and enhance them, and that's why every possible opportunity, I will try to advertise or elevate in some way the ongoing works and operations of each of the member states of the Empire. Now, the Republic of Vesta and the Kingdom of Wayward have in recent years been perhaps slightly quieter in terms of publishing content, in terms of their development and update, progress, and all the rest of it. But I am in virtually constant communication with them. There's barely a week that goes by that I'm not talking about one or the other for one reason or another. So there are always things going on, even if you don't necessarily hear about it. And I know that's a very lazy cop-out, which I personally can't stand when it comes to, well, any entity anyway. Micronations are the worst, where I find, when they say that, oh, we've been going for 15 years, we just never post anything about it or wherever else, because there's, yeah, you know what I mean. But the truth is that they are still plodding along, they're still active, as evidenced by the fact that we're still engaging in works in Wayward South and Southward now. But the fact is that I don't have a lot to advertise as such in terms of them sharing videos or content which I actually put out there. But ultimately, that is what I used to do quite a lot, and that is what I would like to do more of going forward. And that goes for every member state of the Empire that joins in the future as well. I do want to be able to advance their interests. I do want to be able to share their content and highlight their successes. Because this is not just about Stomaria. This is the Empire of Stomaria. This is about everyone that is involved within our community. And it's about building each other up in order to accomplish our common goals. And that is not to tear each other down or erode each other's identity or to do anything like that. Is not a part of that equation. We have the Republic of Vesta, for instance, is based on like a Christianized Roman Empire. That's the kind of aesthetics, the kind of backdrop you have for the Republic of Vesta. That's where their sort of culture and interests are. Whereas you have like the Kingdom of Wayward, which is far more paganistic, if you like. And Molossia beforehand was also of that ilk. They were very much into the pagan culture and the pagan aesthetics and the pagan way of life. I wouldn't pretend to know all the finer details of the ins and outs of each sort of pagan doctrine and all the rest of it. But the bottom line is that each of the member states of the Empire, and you can see this if you look back on any of the photos or videos, they're all very different. They have different uniforms or attire, they have different flags, they have different belief systems, they have different religions, their primary sort of focus. And Stomaria is no different from that. It is a nation within the Empire itself. It's one of the nations that make up the Empire of Stomaria. And we each have our own culture, we each have our own identity, and building each other up without eroding that is a very important aspect of what we're trying to do here. The Royal Federation of Terrestria says, I have a question about Stomaria's funds. How did you originally get enough money to develop Stomaria? We currently need funds to develop Terrestria now and in the future. I'm afraid I don't have the answer that you're necessarily looking for, but there's no magic bullet here. You just have to get yourself a job. You have to work up to actually saving up enough money to advance in the interest of your nation. You can certainly invest funds, which is what I've done in the past and continue to do now, in various different assets and commodities or whatever else it might be. Digital assets, real estate, precious metals, stocks and shares, even currency on some level. But as an aside, just in case there's a follow-up question, I never give advice or guidance when it comes to investment for monetary gain. I will talk about sound money and the necessity of it to acquire it as a deflationary asset, for instance. But in terms of me saying buy this stock or buy this asset or commodity or whatever else because it's going to make you money in the future, I never go down that route. But the long and short of it is, the one thing that you want to do is get yourself a job, save yourself some money. Instead of getting a takeaway or the latest console or the latest phone or going away on holidays or whatever else, put some money aside and just do it. Just spend the money on developing your nation. And I understand that might be a challenge for some people if they are not of an age, or maybe their expenses even their basic living expenses far exceed their ability to save because they're, I don't know, paying extortionate fees for accommodation. Maybe they're a university student or whatever else, or so on and so forth. But ultimately, yeah, you just gotta earn your money and then spend it on developing your nation. You can get other people to contribute as well, in the sense that you can get citizens to get involved, to contribute financially, but you should never rely on that because it won't be a consistent or reliable stream of income. Even things like merchandise and stuff. The thing is, I say that now. So forget what I said about merchandise, because ultimately I think for most people merchandise is a waste of time if money is the goal. In the sense that you could buy 10 or 15 flags or some pin badges or some embroidered arm patches or whatever else because so many people have said, oh, I would love to get some. But if you talk to people that have actually gone through the process of doing this, for the most part, there are exceptions to this obviously, but if you talk to like, I don't know, King Daniel of the Kingdom of Wayward would be a prime example. The amount of merchandise he purchased over the years and just hasn't been able to move it because people say one thing but never actually get around to pulling the trigger to actually purchase some of it. If anything, it can be a net negative in terms of finances. So just be aware of that. But in terms of people voluntarily contributing or people going in with you to actually purchase land or whatever else, that is definitely something that you can look at. But again, just rely on yourself, I think, is probably the safest bet. Guardian1326 says, any new member states join up lately? I tell you what, I had this conversation with I think it was actually King Daniel when I was down at Southwood, and I had this conversation with him saying that the last member state to have been permitted to join the Empire of Stomaria was the Republic of Vesta, and that was it was either November or December 2022. That was the last time he permitted someone to join the Empire. And that's, as I say, it's much like diplomacy and alliances and things like that, which the Quackers Kingdom asked about earlier in this video. It's not from a lack of trying. We get people that try to join the Empire all the time. But the issue is always the same. It's the state. We have a high threshold that people need to be able to reach before we will consider them as prospective member states. There has to be a history of longevity there. There has to be people running it that aren't minors, for lack of a better term. If they're 8 or 9 years old or whatever else, it's obviously a non-starter. We have to make sure that there's longevity, consistency, reliability, make sure their ideology is aligned with ours, make sure their territorial claims are aligned with ours, make sure there's a lot to go in to actually becoming a member state, in the sense that we just don't let anyone join because we can't. Otherwise, we'd be constantly announcing someone's joined and then either left or dissolved or whatever else, and it's just not a good look. It's not something I like to do. I don't like to remove or revoke member states from the Empire. I don't like to have member states leave the Empire. It's not a good look for Stomaria. And so we have to be very restrictive as to who we allow to join. And when Bran Howell, mercifully, and Molossia left the Empire back in 2022, we ramped up the restrictions. We ramped up the criteria to the point where we just don't entertain the idea of letting people join, letting entities join the Empire, unless we're absolutely certain that there's going to be some staying power there and that they are on the same wavelength as we are. So the long and short of it is, the last entity to be permitted to join was the Republic of Vesta back in November, December 2022. So no, not very recent, but perhaps things will change in the coming months and years. Ajit Babi Misful says, we have plans for establishing a university, so within the Micronational community, how can it be implemented? Which Micronation might have a chance of helping us? We have weak diplomatic alliances. You're asking the wrong person, I'm afraid. I do not have my finger on the pulse when it comes to what Micronations are up to these days. I bar the usual dozen or so that quite mainstream, Westarctica or Molossia or Slowjamastan, whatever else, bar those, I know of virtually no other micronation that exists. Because I've spent, what now, better part of 3 years just actively distancing myself from that entirely. So I don't know who is out there that might be able to assist. But if I had to guess, I would say with some confidence that absolutely no micronation out there will be able to assist you with this. Because the history and my experience with micronations and micronationalism more generally, and its